I finally found out the truth about my house. All the mysteries and the stories and the tales going through the neighborhood. And it took me years to really find the truth. And when I found out the truth, that changed everything. Hi, thanks for being here. I'm Dr. Andrea O'Connor, and welcome to my true life medical stories and sometimes mysterious and spooky stories, because I just love talking about interesting things. And if you watched my last video, I talked about finding the secret room in my house, which is a fascinating tale. So if you haven't seen that video, go back and watch about how I found a secret room in my house. And so I promised I would tell you about the history of this house. And it all started literally the first year when we moved in. I got to know some of the neighbors. There were some neighborhood parties and over some conversations. And I know this is all gossip and hearsay. And so you got to take this with a grain of salt of what I'm going to tell you right now until I get to the actual facts. But some of my neighbors, well-meaning, of course, we're like, oh, how do you like your house? Have you heard about the history? And so one of my neighbors said, oh yeah, the SWAT team was out there, helicopters, full armaments of, supplies and people descending on your house. Yeah, that happened. And another neighbor said, oh, there was always motorcycle gangs, all up in your house and your driveway, and they think some motorcycle club or gang owned the house, and they had people coming in and out, and they think there was, illicit activities going on in your house. That was another story we heard from the neighbors. And then another neighbor said, oh yeah, and you have bodies buried in the backyard. I was like, what? And this was in a conversation, a lot of neighbors standing around. Another neighbor said, these neighbors no longer live in my neighborhood, by the way. They said in their house, which is just up at the end of our street, that they, in fact, had an old miner, in the gold rush days when everybody was coming out west, that they would see an old miner, with the full beard, the dungarees, the pickaxe and all that, just strolling through their house. And I was like, no way, because I've had experiences, but I've never seen a full body apparition. And my neighbor, who was a professional, but that's all I'll say because I don't want to out them if they don't want to talk about it, but they swear they saw the full apparition of an Old West miner walking through their house. Now, in the area of Arizona that I live in, there are old mines. They're shut down now, but you can even see the remnants of the old mining shacks still there. And so it does kind of make sense that, you would see something like that. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, I have never seen an old miner walk through my house, but we have had some other experiences in here. But, what were some of the other stories the neighbors were telling me? Just that they heard that there was some crimes that went on in our house. So, years and years of living here and just hearing stories from the different neighbors, I was finally like, that's it. I'm going to do my own research because, on my last video, when I talked about I found a secret room, I'm like, what is going on with this house? And I talked about in my last video, if you haven't seen it yet, I do talk about how, here's what I know for sure about this house before I researched. Motion sensors, cameras everywhere, inside and outside. I still feel like we still find cameras. It's bizarre. And, automatic security gates, there's control panels in many rooms. It's just wild. And this was before, it was kind of cool to have all this. Now people have Ring doorbells and, you can see all that. But This was years and years ago, and you could even switch to a certain channel on our TV, and you could see the feed from all the cameras. And this was before, that was mainstream. Now you can do that all the time, but this was before it was a big deal. So that was one thing about this house I knew for sure. So to me, that pointed to either someone really paranoid lived here, or something went down, or someone was worried about something going down. And the other thing I knew for sure about this house before I did research is the neighbors did tell, The one neighbor said, "You've got bodies buried in the backyard," or I don't know, something like that from what I can remember. And that just does not make sense to me. But, our yard did not have a pool in it. And, you live in Arizona, you live in the West. It's really torture to not be able to go swimming unless, you can go down to a public pool. But there's no public pool near us, and no lake, no pond, no nothing. So we wanted to have a pool put in. So the pool company came out and they do the survey and they ask us, do you know what was here before? And we're like, no. Well, they have ways of, they'll dig, but I'm not sure if they used ultrasound, but either way, they were able to assess our yard. And they told us, you've had a previous pool here, but it's been filled in. And, we can kind of see that, and we can't dig right there. So we had to put the pool on the completely other side of the yard, kind of off in an unusual way, because there was an old pool here that's filled in. Now, I'm not going to jump to conclusions and say, wow, in Arizona, if you have a nice pool in a nice neighborhood, why in the world would you fill your pool in? So, that just added to the mystery to me of this house. Now, I know there's legitimate reasons to fill in a pool. Like maybe you have children and you're worried about drownings occurring, or you're worried about falling into the pool, or just, the cost and the maintenance of, managing a pool. There's a million different reasons to fill in a pool, and I understand that. But it still piqued my curiosity of what in the world. So I did some research. Now, it took me years because as the internet is getting better and better, I was more able to access some information. And so I was able to access old newspapers. So I understand confidentiality. I absolutely understand HIPAA. So believe me, anything I say on my channel, I'm very careful to not divulge names, places, staff. Like I'm very careful about that, just in case. But if something has been of public record and reported, and you stick to the facts, then, you're allowed to talk about it without worried about getting sued. So just because I own this house doesn't mean I can talk about things that may have occurred and didn't. So I'm going to stick to the facts. So I've heard all the stories. I acknowledge that those are all alleged and it's all hearsay. But here's what I know for absolute a fact that happened. And this shocked me. Oh, by the way, before I tell you, like this video if you enjoy this kind of mysterious comment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. And that way you'll always be up to date with the latest. Okay, anyway. So it shocked me. There was a crime in my house. Manslaughter occurred in my house. And when I found that out, I was like, this explains everything, because my husband and I have had some experiences in this house. And, and I know we're in a neighborhood where, yes, a lot of the Old West, there was a lot of mining that went on around here. So, of course, there could be some experiences. But now I had the fact. Manslaughter occurred. Now, it was not murder. Here's what we know about manslaughter. So manslaughter is where someone is killed without malice or like a pre-thought intent, or, so what would be an example of manslaughter? Maybe you get in a fight and, maybe you had too much to drink, and then you're punching each other and you punch someone way too hard and then they ended up passing away. Well, the intent was not to kill the person, but the person died. Maybe that's one good example. If you're a lawyer, please put below an example of manslaughter, because I'm no attorney, but this is from what I understand. Also, if someone dies under the conditions of there was complete neglect, or the situation was so dangerous that someone was probably going to die from what was going on, I guess that could fall under manslaughter too. So I don't know the facts behind the case of the crime that occurred in my house, but I do know that someone passed away and someone was charged with manslaughter, and that someone did serve a prison sentence. And so I also can say of public report that this occurred in the family room. Now, it is interesting because in our house, and by the way, I do not live in a mansion. I've had a couple people reply and say, "Oh my God, you must be rich." No, this is just a regular house. We're just, regular neighborhood. But, there's been some add-ons and some changes with the house and whatnot. But I would say we have 3 rooms that could maybe count as a family room. Like, because we have, we have a family room, we have a dining room, and then, you have a family room, a living room, and a dining room. So which one was the family room? What do they consider a family room? Like right now, I've said it before, I'm in our den, which I also use as an office, just a private office, not for patients. So I don't know what room it occurred in, but there is one room in my house. I don't hang out in that room. Like, yeah, it's decorated nicely. My husband's in that room a lot. And I'm not in there because my husband's in there. I love my husband, let me just say. But I don't feel comfortable in that room. I hang out in all the other rooms. So that's one thing to me that's interesting. And again, this proves nothing. And my husband said he would do a video with me because he's had some experiences in the house, and I'll save that for him to talk about. But I do have to share one story that happened to him. He was taking a nap in the family room where the public report that anyone can see, it was to the public that someone had died in that room. My husband was taking a nap on the sofa, just kind of laying there, and he said he felt like a hand just slamming down on his chest. And, he wasn't asleep, he was kind of in that in-between state. And I was like, oh my gosh. Well, now knowing this information about my house, I feel like it explains things that have occurred around our house. And I don't know. And again, I talked about it on my last video. When I found the secret room, that information was not divulged to me. And honestly, I've had some people comment, and you're right. Maybe the realtor didn't know. Maybe the woman selling the house, maybe she didn't know, because a lot of people have owned this house. So I'm not saying it's the people that own the house before me that this occurred in, because honestly, I don't want to reveal any names or families. I don't think that's right. If you because I know some people have already did some research, please do not post any names. It's not right. These people are probably still alive. Please do not, if you're one of those armchair investigators, please do not post any names, because I will delete the comment. I love that you're here, but I'm not trying to, embarrass anyone. I'm being very careful and only stating information that was public record. Okay. So, I get it. Maybe the realtor didn't know that crime occurred here, but it's interesting. And again, I know nothing about real estate law, but I thought when there was a crime or a killing, manslaughter, murder, any of that, don't you have to divulge that information? Or maybe you don't. Again, I don't know the law. Now, am I upset that they didn't divulge that I had to find that out because things were happening around the house and neighbors were telling me the craziest stories? And I was like, okay, I got to find out because I have kids. I needed to know. And plus, I was worried, is someone going to show up at my house and finish the job? Or, with all the security here, I mean, I was concerned. So it led me to do some research. I had to find out what was going on. So, I have to admit that nobody talked about it. And we love living here. I mean, we love living in this house. But that changed everything. Now that I know that happened here, I kind of look at all these incidences and events that have happened here in a different light. But we still loving here. We love living here. We have no plans of moving. And I would be really curious to know if anything like this has happened to you. We're going to probably stay on this series for a little bit, but that's what I've got for today. And thanks for being here. I'll see you on the next one.